The water was cold. Not the kind of cold that shocks you for a second and then fades. The kind that grabs you, wraps around your chest, and squeezes. Her blazer, the only good blazer she owned, soaked through in seconds and pulled her down like an anchor. Her shoes filled with water. Her skirt twisted around her legs. Everything in her body screamed, "Go back up." But she didn't go back up. Because somewhere below her, in that cold, silent water, a boy was sinking. And not a single one of the 50 people standing at the edge of that pool had moved. Not one. She kicked harder. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something. I need you to understand who Zara Coleman was before that moment. Because it would be easy to hear this story and think she was someone special. Someone born for heroism. Someone with nothing to lose. But that's not who Zara was. Zara was 17 years old, and she was tired. The good kind of tired, the kind that comes from loving people hard and working even harder. She lived in a small apartment in the Westfield district with her mother Diane and her 10-year-old brother Eli. 2 bedrooms, patched floors, furniture that had seen better decades. But that apartment was immaculate. Because Diane Washington believed that dignity didn't cost money. And she raised her daughter to believe the same thing. Every morning, Zara's alarm went off 13 minutes before her mother's. Just enough time to start Eli's routine. Breakfast arranged just the way he liked it. Tablet charged and ready. Because Eli was autistic and mostly nonverbal, and that tablet, scratch screen and all, was how he told the world what he needed. How he said, "I'm hungry." How he said, "I'm scared." How he said, "On the mornings when everything felt right, sister, good." Those 2 words. That was enough for Zara. That was everything. Diane worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. A cleaning shift in the early mornings and catering on the weekends. She moved through life like a woman who had decided that exhaustion was not an excuse, and she had passed that same quiet strength down to her daughter. Zara was in her final year of high school, 1 interview away from a social work program at Northside Community College. She wanted to help families like hers. Families who fell through the cracks because the system wasn't built with them in mind. That was the dream. And on this particular morning, that dream felt close enough to touch. But life, as it often does for people who can't afford for anything to go wrong, had other plans. The childcare fell through. Diane got the call that morning, and her face said everything before her mouth did. The fundraiser at the Lakeview Grand Club was one of the biggest catering jobs of the year. 200 guests. Good tips. She couldn't cancel. But she also couldn't leave Eli alone. So they went. All 3 of them. Now the Lakeview Grand Club. Let me paint you a picture. Marble floors that reflected light like a mirror. Chandeliers that probably cost more than Diane made in a year. Men in suits, women in dresses, all gathered to raise money for opportunities while the people serving their champagne could barely afford rent. 2 worlds in one building, separated by a name tag and a staff corridor. The manager, Mr. Holt, met Diane at the entrance with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked at Zara the way people sometimes look at things that don't belong, like a problem that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. Staff children are not permitted in the facility. Diane explained. Quietly, carefully, the way you explain things when you know the power balance and you can't afford to tip it. Mr. Holt crossed his arms, considered it, and made his position very clear. Staff corridor only. No guest areas. If I see her anywhere else, you're both gone. Zara nodded. She understood the rule. She'd understood rules like this her whole life. People like her were allowed in places like this only to serve. Never to be seen. Never to take up space. "We'll stay invisible," she told her mother. And for a while they did. She sat in that narrow corridor with Eli beside her, his tablet glowing in the dim light. Through a small window, she could see the guests arriving. She watched them laugh and gesture and clink glasses. And she felt that particular loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who look right through you. She didn't know that across the building, a boy named Nathan Briggs was feeling something very similar. Nathan was 12 years old. Autistic. Quiet. He communicated through a tablet, a top-of-the-line one with custom programming, because his father Conrad Briggs could afford the best of everything. Conrad was a billionaire. A tech mogul. The kind of man whose name appeared on buildings. He stood at the podium that afternoon talking about leveling the playing field and giving everyone a fair chance. While back home his son's occupational therapist was the one who showed up to breakfast. Nathan didn't want to be at this fundraiser. Too many people. Too much noise. Too much of everything. His hands moved in small, repetitive patterns, his way of calming a body that the world kept overwhelming. His nanny was supposed to be watching him. She was checking her phone. And that's when Dylan Ashworth found him. Dylan was 19, a senator's son, the kind of boy who had grown up believing that consequences were for other people. He found Nathan alone near the pool terrace, quieter and away from the crowd, and he saw not a child in distress but an opportunity for entertainment. He and his two friends circled Nathan slowly, laughing, mocking the way his hands moved, calling him broken. Nathan backed away toward the pool, desperate for silence, for stillness, for escape. He pulled out his tablet, the one thing that made him feel safe. Dylan snatched it. Nathan's eyes went wide with a panic that had no words. That tablet was his voice. His only voice. Dylan threw it into the pool. It hit the water with a splash and began to sink. And Nathan, without thinking, without calculating, without anything except the desperate instinct to retrieve the one thing that let him speak, lunged forward, reached out, lost his balance. And fell in. The laughter stopped. Dylan's face went pale. His friends froze. And then, one by one, the guests began to gather at the pool's edge. 50 people. Gasps. Murmurs. Phones raised. Not one person moved to help. Because real drowning doesn't look like the movies. There's no splashing. No screaming. No waving arms. Just a boy, sinking slowly, silently, into the deep end of a pool in a building full of people who couldn't see him. But Zara saw him. From that corridor window, she saw the way his body moved. Wrong. She knew that movement. She had pulled Eli from a pool 3 years ago, and she had never forgotten the shape of that terror. She was on her feet before she had made a conscious decision. She was running before she had thought it through. Mr. Holt appeared in the hallway. Where do you think you're going? A boy is drowning. That is not your concern. Staff corridor only. She didn't stop. She burst through the terrace doors and 50 faces turned to stare at her. The poor girl in the thrift store blazer. Out of place. Breaking the rule. She didn't care. She ran to the edge and she dove. The cold hit her like a wall. Her blazer pulled her down. Her shoes filled instantly. But she kicked. She reached. She found Nathan in the dark water, and she grabbed his shirt, and she held him the way she had learned to hold Eli when the world became too much. Firm. Steady. You're safe. I've got you. They broke the surface together. Nathan coughed. Gasped. Looked at her with eyes full of something he couldn't say. Alive. Conrad Briggs shoved through the crowd and dropped to his knees at the pool's edge. He grabbed his son. He looked up at Zara, soaking wet, shaking, mascara running down her face. You saved him, he whispered. How did you know? 50 people were standing there. How did you know? She looked at him quietly. My brother. He's like Nathan. I know what drowning looks like. For one moment, just one, the world felt like it had done the right thing. Then security arrived. And the girl who had just saved a child's life was about to be accused of trying to end it. She hadn't broken a rule. She had broken their story. And they couldn't forgive her for it. There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a room when someone realizes the world is about to be unfair and there is nothing they can do to stop it. Zara felt that silence the moment security walked in. She was still dripping. Pool water soaking into a Persian rug that probably cost more than 6 months of her mother's rent. Someone had handed her a towel, but she hadn't moved to use it. She was watching the room shift. Watching the way people who had just seen her save a life were now rearranging themselves, adjusting their stories, deciding what they had actually witnessed. It happens faster than you think. The moment power decides it needs a different ending. Mr. Brennan, the head of security, pulled Conrad aside and showed him the footage on a tablet screen. The camera angle was bad. Or maybe it wasn't bad at all. Maybe it was chosen carefully. Because what it showed was Zara walking toward the pool terrace, Nathan at the edge, and then Nathan falling. From that angle, from that distance, it looked like she had been right beside him. It looked like something it wasn't. And 3 young men in expensive clothes had already decided what story they were telling. Dylan Ashworth and his 2 friends stood with matching expressions of practiced concern, and they told security that they had seen Zara push Nathan into the pool. That she had been aggressive. That they had watched the whole thing. Their words were clean, confident, and almost identical. The kind of identical that only happens when a story has been rehearsed. Police were called. The officer arrived with a notepad and the particular brand of careful neutrality that isn't really neutrality at all. He listened to Mr. Brennan's summary. He looked at the footage. He looked at Zara. And then he told her she would need to come to the station for a formal statement. Am I being arrested? Not at this time. But we need to investigate the allegations. Conrad stepped forward immediately. She was 17. She wouldn't go anywhere without legal representation. His voice carried the quiet authority of a man who had never once in his life been told to wait his turn. He called his attorney before Zara had finished wrapping the towel around her shoulders. But even with Conrad in her corner, Zara understood what was happening. She had grown up understanding exactly how this worked. 3 wealthy 19-year-olds against 1 black girl from the Westfield district. A blurry camera angle that told half a story. And a system that had already quietly made up its mind. That night, she sat at the kitchen table and told her mother everything. Diane's face moved through a dozen emotions in the space of a few seconds. Pride, fear, heartbreak, fury. She reached across the table and took both of her daughter's hands and held them. You saved a child's life. And now they're treating me like I tried to end it. Diane didn't let go of her hands. We'll figure it out. Mom, your job. I've been poor before. I'll be poor again. But I will never be ashamed of you for having a good heart. Eli wandered in quietly. He had been sensing the tension all evening the way he always did, absorbing the weight of the room without being able to name it. He looked at his sister for a long moment. Then he typed on his tablet and held it up so she could read it. Sister Hero. Zara's eyes filled with tears. By the next morning, her name was on every local news channel. Her school photo, 2 years old, braces still visible, was plastered across screens everywhere. Her neighborhood was mentioned. Her mother's name was mentioned. The comment sections were vicious and fast and certain, the way people on the internet are always certain about things they didn't witness. Strangers who had never met her had already decided who she was. And then at 10 in the morning, District Attorney Rebecca Sloan stepped up to a podium and made it official. She was polished. She was confident. It was an election year, and she wore that fact like a second suit. She played the edited footage for the cameras. She spoke about protecting vulnerable individuals. She announced charges of assault and reckless endangerment against Zara Coleman. And then she said something that made Conrad Briggs, watching from his office, go completely still. She said that Nathan Hastings was nonverbal and therefore unable to provide a reliable statement. Unable to provide a reliable statement. She had looked at a 12-year-old boy who communicated differently from her, and she had decided his voice didn't count. Not just Nathan's voice. Every person who had ever been told their way of speaking wasn't valid enough for a courtroom. Every child who typed instead of talked. Every person who the system had ever looked at and decided wasn't worth listening to. Conrad turned off the television. He walked to his son's room. Nathan was sitting at his desk with his new tablet, the one Conrad had ordered overnight to replace the one at the bottom of the pool. He looked up when his father came in. Conrad sat down across from him, slowly, the way you sit when you're carrying something heavy. Oliver, he said quietly, the people trying to hurt Amani say you can't tell us what happened, that your voice doesn't count. He paused. Do you want to show them they're wrong? Nathan looked at his father for a long moment. Then he looked at his tablet. His fingers began to move. Conrad pressed record. What came next was slow and careful and absolutely clear. Nathan typed every word with the full weight of someone who had spent his whole life being underestimated and had decided, in this moment, that he was done with it. Boys were mean. Took my tablet. Threw it in the water. I tried to get it. I fell. Couldn't breathe. Conrad's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Did Zara push you? No. Did she help you? Yes. She saved me. She's brave. Nathan paused. His fingers hovered. Then he typed the words that would stop a nation cold. People think I can't talk. But I can. My words count. Zara is good. Please believe me. Conrad stopped the recording. He sat in silence for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called his attorney, Sandra Okafor, and told her they were going public. But Sandra had been busy too. Her investigator, a former FBI agent named Rachel, had been pulling threads all morning, and what she had found was not a loose end. It was the whole unraveling. First, there was Eleanor Fung, 72 years old, a club member for over 3 decades. She had been on the pool terrace when Nathan fell, and she had seen everything, every single moment of it, from Dylan's group cornering Nathan to the tablet hitting the water to Zara diving in. She had tried to give her account to security immediately after the incident. She had been turned away. The security supervisor who turned her away was Dylan Ashworth's uncle. Then there were the text messages. Subpoenaed from Dylan's phone, they told the story with a clarity that no camera angle could distort. Messages sent the night before the fundraiser. Hastings' charity thing tomorrow. His weird kid will be there. Dad says Hastings is why his education bill failed. Let's embarrass him. And then after Nathan fell, after the panic set in, the message that revealed everything. Delete the video. Say the girl pushed him. Her word against ours. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't boys being careless. This was deliberate. A senator's son had targeted a 12-year-old autistic child to settle a political score. And when it went wrong, he had pointed at an innocent girl and told the world she was guilty because he believed, with every ounce of his inherited confidence, that no one would choose her word over his. Senator Ashworth himself called Conrad the night before the press conference. Conrad put it on speaker so Sandra could hear. The senator's voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who had spent decades trading in favors and consequences. We need to talk, Richard. My son made a mistake. Boys being boys. Drop your support for the girl, and the charges disappear quietly. And if I don't, she's nobody. Think strategically. I have influence. Government contracts. We can help each other. Conrad's voice went very cold and very calm. She's nobody, he repeated slowly. You said that about a 17-year-old girl who dove into a pool to save my son's life while 50 people stood and watched. You said that. Silence. Tomorrow, everyone knows what your son did. He hung up. The press conference the next morning was everything. The room was packed before 9:30. Cameras everywhere. Every major outlet. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Conrad stood at the podium with Nathan beside him and Sandra in the front row next to Zara, who sat straight-backed and quiet, hands folded, wearing a new blazer that Conrad had quietly arranged because he understood, without being told, that the one she'd worn into that pool was gone. Conrad laid it all out. Eleanor's testimony played on the big screens, her voice steady and certain. Dylan's text messages appeared in full. The gap in the security footage, 2 minutes conveniently missing, was explained. The connection between the security supervisor and Dylan's family was named out loud for every camera in the room. And then he turned to Nathan. Want to show them you have a voice? Nathan nodded. The video played on the screens. Nathan's face, his careful fingers, his words spoken by his tablet into a room full of people who had been told he couldn't speak reliably. People think I can't talk. But I can. My words count. Please believe me. The room went absolutely silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of people waiting for something to happen. The deep silence of 200 people simultaneously feeling something crack open inside their chests. A reporter in the third row was visibly crying. Someone near the back started clapping. Then another person. Then another. The entire room stood. Conrad waited for quiet. Then he looked directly into the cameras. District Attorney Sloan. You have a choice. Drop these charges and pursue justice against the real perpetrators. Or continue prosecuting an innocent girl and prove that our system values power over truth. He stepped back. Zara stood. Her hands were shaking. Her voice was not. I want people to stop assuming guilt based on where someone is from or what they look like. I want kids like my brother and Nathan to be heard, not dismissed. She paused and took a breath. Dylan Ashworth almost destroyed my life because he thought I didn't matter. I hope he learns that everyone matters. That's the only justice I need. The applause was deafening. By noon, Senator Ashworth had withdrawn from his re-election campaign. By 2 p.m, Dylan stood in front of cameras with his attorney and a prepared statement, his face pale, his voice stripped of all its old confidence. I was wrong. I harassed Nathan Briggs. When he fell, I panicked and blamed Zara Washington instead of accepting responsibility. He looked up from the paper. Zara, if you're watching, I'm sorry. You're a better person than I'll ever be. By 3 o'clock, DA Rebecca Sloan dropped all charges and issued a public apology. The system failed her. I failed her. That ends now. That evening, Diane Washington received a job offer from the Briggs Foundation. Senior role. Full benefits. A workplace that welcomed Eli. She read the letter 3 times before she believed it. Northside Community College sent Zara a personal letter. Full scholarship. Guaranteed acceptance. Your courage and character are exactly what this program needs. We would be honored to have you. Weeks later, at a therapy pool where Nathan was slowly learning to swim, Zara sat beside him at the water's edge after his lesson. He had floated today. Just for a moment, just a few seconds, but he had let the water hold him, and he had not been afraid. He picked up his tablet. You saved me twice. Once from the water. Once when you showed people my voice matters. Zara looked at him for a long moment. Your voice always mattered, she said softly. People just needed to learn how to listen. Nathan typed one more thing. Now they listen. She smiled. Now they listen. 1 year later, Zara Coleman graduated with honors and founded a nonprofit called Voices Matter, supporting caregiving families in underserved communities. Nathan Briggs became an autism self-advocate, speaking at conferences across the country using his communication device. Diane directed community outreach at the Briggs Foundation, helping hundreds of families access the resources they deserved. And Eli got a new tablet. Top of the line. Custom programmed. The first thing he typed on it was the same thing he always said to his sister. Sister Good. She had been told to stay invisible. She had stayed anyway. And the world slowly, imperfectly, beautifully had learned to see her. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere out there is a Zara who just needs to know that jumping in, even when it costs you everything, is always worth it. Every voice matters. Even the quiet ones. Especially the quiet ones.